and welcome back to the I Rehab Podcast. My name is Nick Kane, and this is the third installment of our career series, Entry to Exit, Careers in Professional Sport, which is a 4-part podcast series that we're doing, I guess, around the different stages of one's professional career. And the first episode was based around getting into sport, and the second around how to last a long time in sport. They're both now live on the podcast, so I recommend you going back and having a listen if you missed those ones. Today, we're chatting around the female clinician in sport, and we open up some really great conversation and discussions. And that's led by Sallie Cowan, who's a APA titled musculoskeletal physiotherapist and associate professor at the University in Melbourne. She was a lead author of a paper in which I'll reference shortly. As well, we have Stefanio Rizzo, who's worked in the NBA for many, many years, including being the director of performance rehabilitation at the Brooklyn Nets most recently. She also is one of the founders of the NBA Physiotherapy Association. And to round out our panel, we have Hanna, who's a sports physiotherapist. She's worked a lot in the AFL program here in Australia and also for the Matildas, which is their national soccer team. Now, in today's conversation, we reference two key papers and probably talk to them a fair bit. So we'll include them in our show notes, and we recommend you read them. One was Sallie Cowan was the lead author, along with 10 plus other authors as part of that, including Mel Haberfield, Andrea Mosler, Kay Crosley, etc., Kate Beerworth. And it's titled, "You Have to Work Twice as Hard as Women to Show You Are Competent, Experiences, Opportunities and Workplace Gender Harassment for Sport and Exercise Medicine Practitioners Working in Elite Sport." And the second one we'll talk to is more of an editorial that Hanna wrote for the Australian Physiotherapy magazine some 5 to 6 years ago, and that was termed "Women Navigating the Sports Therapy Playing Field." And she shared some really open experiences there, and she talks to how the field has improved, but where we still have some work to go. And it was really nice balancing the experiences from, I guess, some Australian sport there to obviously the NBA with Steph. Okay, and finally, just a reminder around our package that we have going right now to celebrate this career series, to set your year up to help progress your career. And that's a 5-part package that includes $26 off your annual subscription for 2026 with the Sports Vet Masterclass, a self-assessment performer, a CPD and career planning document, 5 bonus lectures from our recent NEAT conference, which was top quality content there, and invite-only access to a live Q&A or on-demand with Dan Howes from Collaborative Sports and Simon Hall around some key insights into breaking into different roles in different nations and countries. All right, well, let's jump into it. Again, a big thanks to our guests for being really open and sharing about this really important conversation. Okay, here we are. Welcome to the I Rehab Podcast. It's the third installment of the career series, and I'm really excited about this topic and our guests here today to chat around the female clinician working in high performance or elite sport. And we've got 3 obviously tremendous guests. Look, to kick things off, I want to get a bit of a feel on yourself and your background a little bit. So I'll throw a question just to sort of get things going and hear a bit of a story about how you landed your first role in either professional sport or in your association within sport. And I might start with the US contingent there with Stefanio to give us a bit of an insight there.
Oh, hi. Well, it's really an honor to be here. So I want to say thank you. I'll go with the first time I took an NBA job as opposed to the NHL, which I did prior to that. I was actually just visiting a friend in the US who also took a job in the NBA, just thinking I was going for a visit, and met a lot of people on that trip, but just enjoyed myself, found myself just, liking the connections and everything. And I didn't realize I was meeting the assistant GM one day. And that assistant GM actually became a GM of another team later on. And several years later, I guess when he was looking for a PT hire, he remembered me from our meeting that day. And so it resonated with me that we don't know who we're meeting and who we're talking to at any point in time, and that every connection is so valuable, and to treat every individual as being, somebody very important, which they are, because you never know where these things are going to go. And my connection to the NBA was really just through an off chance, casual encounter, visiting a friend at a different facility. So that was my story for the NBA.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a a great example of, I guess you could put it under networking, but it's just purely about being, building a network, and that's informal element of, I'm sure you weren't there hunting a job trying to speak to him. It just sort of came your way organically because you were, out there and having great conversations. So it's really good learning. How about yourself, Lauren?
I was probably a little bit similar to Stefania in a way. I knew while I was studying physio that I wanted to get into sport, and I sort of gave myself lots of opportunities to become a sports trainer and work in clinics. And I was a receptionist at a osteopathic clinic, and there was a massage therapist that worked there that was also a massage therapist at Melbourne Storm. And she knew I was pretty keen, and she said, "Oh, well, why don't you come and start doing some massage therapy while you're studying physio, and you can have a bit of an exposure to a professional sports team." So it wasn't necessarily as a physio, but I got sort of the bug from that. And once I'd finished my degree, I was sort of looking at, well, where are the best sort of physios that are working in sports teams working, and which sports teams are they working for? And I was really had my heart set on working at Life Care Paran. They had a lot of great physios there, and within 12 months, I was able to get a job at Melbourne Victory as well. Just, again, probably chance encounters with people, staying curious and asking lots of questions and being interested. It probably put me in a really good position as well. But again, it's more about maybe that networking early on.
Yeah, it was really interesting chat in the first episode we did. If anyone's missed listening about getting into sport, Chris Bell talked a lot around, knowing where you need to go to sort of network, build yourself a repertoire, being around the right sort of people, and whether that's finding jobs that are under someone, a really good mentor, or finding different avenues to learn off different people. So you sound like you were really proactive with that in sussing a clinic that's suited and opportunities. So nice work. And Sallie, what's a bit about your journey?
Yeah, so I guess to start with, I'm not really a sports physio. I'm more musculoskeletal physio, and I haven't done any real elite sport work, but I've done a lot of work in the community level sport. And I guess my first foray of getting into that was very similar to both Stefanio and Lauren, in that I was doing physio, I was at college. A lot of my mates there were playing for the Uni Blues footy club, and they're like, "Oh, you've got to come along and, be the sports trainer here." And I think I finally did that in third year. And then who is the doctor there but Peter Bruckner, who, is obviously well known by anyone in the sports med field. And he, since then has been a great mentor. And, I still work with him today at La Trobe. So it was, just following some advice or, being in the right place, but also, pushing yourself to, go along to an environment where you mightn't initially have felt comfortable in, to put yourself in the right place at the right time.
Great advice. You never know what will come your way by just starting something and doing it. So that's a great example. And yeah, probably no one better to meet early on in your career. Yeah. Now, leading into obviously this sort of next question, I guess might really frame to you, Sallie, initially, and you were the lead author in this paper that we'll clearly reference and talk to a little bit. And it says you have to work twice as hard as women to show you are competent, experiences, opportunities, and workplace gender harassment for sport and exercise med practitioners working in elite sport in Australia. And we'll clearly have that in the show notes, and really recommend people reading that. It really opens the door for lots of conversation in around this space. And part of what we'll do today is also reference an article Lauren wrote, more of an editorial for the Australian Physio Association 5+ years ago. And it really resonates. There's quite a lot of crossover, and obviously she wrote that before this research had come out based on her experiences, which we'll talk to a little bit. But one of those points, Sallie, was women were 4 times more likely than men to report that their gender or sexual orientation influenced opportunities in elite sport. Can you give us some insights into this, and then I might throw some questions around the floor around examples where people may have felt that have been the case or not?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I don't think I really ever thought about that gender might actually affect my opportunities until I was actually well into my career. I was probably a little bit naive initially, and that I was, raised to believe that I could do anything if I worked hard enough, and that any success I got was really going to be entirely due to my own hard work. And then I guess it's only more recently, and probably in the process of doing the research for this paper, that I became much more aware that the system, the whole sort of hierarchy, the structures that are already in place are often just seen as the norm. And they're actually totally biased against us as women. And I realise that even when you do everything right as an individual, as a woman, the way that jobs are found, the way the roles are allocated, hours are paid, and behaviour is policed, it's really set up in ways that consistently advantage men and disadvantage you just because you are a woman. And so I guess this, really stood out and sort of was the impetus for doing the paper and actually finding out. We're more interested to find out whether it had actually changed, because we were well aware that in, the early 90s, our time, some of the older physios at La Trobe, that it, probably wasn't great, but we I guess didn't really acknowledge it and just got on with the job. But then we were hearing from current physios working in the AFL, the AFLW and other elite sports settings that perhaps not a lot had changed. So that sort of gave us the impetus to actually see if we can get some evidence, back up what we were hearing. And then the next push from that is like, what do we do?
Yep. Brilliant summary. And the research is really important. So Lauren, even in your editorial 5+ years ago, look, there was a lot mentioned within that short piece. That's really insightful. But one of the things was how limited number of females there was working in the AFL, and that may have improved a little bit in the last 5 years, but not extensively. There's no one in key leadership roles, head of medical, head physios, that's a female in the AFL, and we'll speak more broadly away from Australia shortly. Can you give us some insights into, I guess, or share an example of where you felt your gender might have influenced an opportunity for you, positively or negatively?
Yeah, I think, like we said in that article, there wasn't many female physios, and now there definitely is more, but I would have to say that a lot of them are still like more part-time roles. And like you mentioned, they're not leadership positions. I think that some of the barriers for that are when women are at an age where they can take on those leadership positions. It's often times where we're moving away to start a family. So you may have done your university degree, had some experience, done your sports masters. You've done a few years as maybe a junior physio position, and probably particularly in the AFL I can sort of speak to. And then when you're starting to move into those, your mid to late 30s, where you might be expected to move into a leadership role where having to take time out to have kids, or roles are really difficult to be flexible in those environments. I know through COVID, a lot of other employers could change the way that they worked, and there was more flexibility around times and caregiving around the house. But I think to AFL, COVID almost, the salary cap reduced and they went into hubs, so you're working more for almost less money. And then on the back side of that, it was probably a similar experience as well. So it made it really challenging to be able to take on leadership positions. And I had an example where I did actually apply for a leadership position that was full-time, and I was told that once my application got through, someone on the panel actually called me privately and said, "We don't think you can do this job. We don't think that it's the right time for you for this job. It's going to be 6 or 7 days a week. You just won't have the time to do it." So I actually withdrew my application at that point. So that feeds into a lot of, I guess, self-talk and belief systems that often women hold, and then that often breeds some of that imposter syndrome and the feeling that we can't take on those positions.
And how do you feel now about that, having, I guess, maybe it was your younger self withdrew an application? How does that make you feel now, and would you do anything differently, and knowing your situation?
I definitely would. I think I would have stood up to myself a lot more. I think it was, it ended up sort of getting out through the organisation I was working for, and HR found out, and they came and had a discussion with me, but it was never really resolved or handled well. And I feel like I would have probably pushed more to say, hey, I'm worthy of this job and I need to make my own decisions around my own time and how I can manage those. And there shouldn't be this unconscious bias that limits what we can achieve, because they don't know what my family situation's like or what my care arrangements are like as well.
Definitely. And we will obviously maybe talk later in this chat around what, as Sallie mentioned, what can we do about it as well? What are some spaces we can work on to improve that now? Steph, keen to hear from your experiences. Don't know the NBA landscape as well as maybe the Australian landscape within sport. And I guess, framing a similar question to you in the sense of, do you have an example where you felt that's has been the case? And if so, what impact did it have on whether, on your confidence or your career planning?
Yeah, I mean, I feel really fortunate because I wouldn't say that I've experienced that degree of bias in my career. My career has happened very kind of organically from level to level in sport. And I started off in Canadian sport, working locally. I've been working for 25 years, but volunteering locally to working provincial to national to the Olympic sport realm and then to professional sport. And I've worked with male sport most of my career. And I've never felt, I would say, I've never felt like my path has been inhibited because I was female. And I think there's some reasons for that. I've had great male mentors and female mentors along the way. And so my confidence level's always been where it needed to be for my experience level, I think. Now, can I tell you that I should have progressed in responsibility and leadership earlier? I don't know, because those are opportunities I didn't see or maybe I didn't apply for. But I've had a better experience, I would say. And I think within the NBA in the past 10 years, it is so much more normal to have a large contingent of females as your performance team staff. Where there's still a gap and room to grow is in the leadership positions. There's not many of those. And that's, I believe, very organization specific. And I think we'll probably end up talking about that later. But as far as leading an entire performance team, there's definitely more males doing that in the NBA. But as far as how the teams are weighted, there's more and more females all the time.
You can definitely see that from the outside, having, working with the staff at different clubs and seeing that balance certainly, looks a little bit more even across the board. Now, when it comes, I think, Sallie, you mentioned a little bit earlier around, the fewer women, your ability to actually get into the role or into a sporting role. And we touched on around the networking space in the first question. But I guess most roles within your paper, Sallie, it mentions how they're not directly advertised. And often jobs in performance sport can be by direct approach. Even Steph there, hey, come and work for us, rather than, I guess, moving through a advertised job recruitment or it's a promotion from within. Does already having fewer females in the sport, so certainly from football, sports and different things, does that limit women entering the sport further? Is that sort of what that research has found, Sallie?
Yeah, absolutely. So having fewer women already in the system really limits future women entering it. Because we know that sort of informal and network-based recruitment actually tends to really replicate the existing demographics of the workspace. So it really favours those who already look like the position. So it favours men for sure. So it means that the opportunity is much more likely to circulate within that male-dominated network. Women are less likely to be thought of and recommended. Or directly approached for roles. So one of the first things, that we need every sporting organisation to do is to have open and transparent recruitment.
Yep. Now, that's a really good, obviously, actionable item. Lauren, in your experience, you were obviously quite proactive with sorting your path in your initial journey. What's something you would pass on now if for early career female who wants to get into sport that don't quite have those networks, but what can they sort of do to get themselves in a position where they're going to sort of find themselves getting the roles they need and want?
I think one of them is, trying to find a mentor or someone that can help. I know that can be intimidating at the start, but I have a lot of younger and generally they seem to be female physios asking me for advice and seeking that out. And I guess, trying to navigate those early steps. Should I go into this clinic? Should I go into that clinic? What would be the best for me? How do I get experience in sport? And unfortunately, it's still a lot of, maybe working for sports teams that aren't professional or semi-professional and getting paid not that well to begin with. It's just, I guess it's a bit of a rite of passage for getting those opportunities and showing how keen you are. I think working at a really good sports clinic is key as well, because you've got often sports doctors or sports physios that are already working in sport, and if they see you keen and see that value, they might give you an opportunity to come and observe them for a day or mentor you that way. So it happens organically because of the environment that you're in as well.
Yeah, great advice. And Steph, if I'm a female clinician, I want to come and work in the NBA with yourself or the likes of the other physios. How can I go about doing that to sort of get my foot in the door? What's some advice you might pass on?
Yeah, I've been asked that before on podcasts, and I actually get asked that regularly, I would say, on LinkedIn. I'm graduating from university and I want to work in pro sport. How do I get there? And I don't know that you can really write that answer back to anyone, because everybody that I know that works in professional sport got there in a different way. And so I think so much of it is building those connections and those networks. But those networks don't have to be, famous physios that are working internationally. My first opportunities in sport that were quite significant came from friends of mine through physio school who heard of opportunities and said, hey, are you available for this or that? A female friend got me involved with Canada Snowboard. A male friend got me involved with Alpine Canada, and that led to the Olympics a couple times, which was great. But that was from putting it out there that I wanted to work in sport. I also didn't rush my process, so I know it's different for other people. I went through my orthopedics. I did all my my Canadian version of whatever the American is with FCAMP and manipulation and everything. So I tried to become as good a clinician as I could. And my path was very organic. Again, like I said, went level to level. And as my confidence built as a physiotherapist, so did the responsibility of the athlete that I was working with. So I would say, for a young clinician, work on your skill set, make your intentions known to the people around you. We don't have the same access to people. Really try to build good communication and connection skills, because I think most people look out for people that they've enjoyed their encounter with. You can build people's skill sets, but if it's somebody that you want to work with, 7 days a week, that stands out. And then, there's always the opportunity to meet new people at conferences, courses, seminars and that kind of thing too. But myself, I didn't chase it. I think it was just sort of, I stumbled into every correct opportunity along the way. And that's a hard thing to replicate, because some of it is good luck as well. But I think just communicating what your intentions are and building your skill set along the way is a big part.
Oh, lovely insights. I think, I'm sure physios, and I'm trying to reflect if I was the same, but that element of like rush to just, I just want to go get there and work there. But reality is, as you mentioned, it takes, honing the craft, doing the work. Lauren touched on, it does probably take some volunteer elements here and there. Like there's a fair bit of work that it takes to get into there, and it's probably that timely process, and to try to hopefully just be the fundamental core of being a really good clinician first. And if you're doing that well, then opportunities will come your way, as per your example there. So thanks for sharing that. All right, moving to, I guess, reflecting at the moment. I mean, Lauren, I've worked with Matildas, obviously top level female soccer here in Australia, national team, as well as men's AFL. And Stefanio, you've worked across a number of sports. Within the research, it did sort of touch on practitioners. Female practitioners were more likely to work with women rather than with male athletes. I'll start with you, Sallie, to expand on that finding for us, and then we can explore that further.
Yeah, so certainly within the research, we did find that women physios were much more likely to work with women teams, and men were more likely to work with men teams or men athletes. And it often, for the women, didn't feel like a choice. It was more that they were, probably subtly steered in that way through probably everything from the recruitment process to people assuming they'd be a good fit for a women's team. And then obviously the flow-on effect of that, particularly in Australia and I assume worldwide, is that, the men's teams are better paid, have higher profiles, which then leads to women working with women's teams and not getting paid as much, not having as many paid hours. And so it is it's a big issue.
Yeah, it's a flow-on effect. What do you think is the reason for that? Like, is that, is it an unconscious bias that people feel women are better suited working with women, or is it, and if so, how can organisations actively counter this?
I think it is an unconscious bias. I think it happens across all workplaces, probably, and it really does limit opportunities for women and really enforces or reinforces those gendered silos. So I think organisations, we would like them to be much more proactive in this space and really, I guess, explicitly decoupling practitioner gender from team allocation in policies and messaging. And then, as we touched on before, coming back to really transparent merit-based selection for roles across all programs. So jobs that are advertised obviously have explicit position descriptions. And then further down the track, I think really tracking which teams have, who works for which teams based on gender, and reviewing whether there are any patterns for bias within your organisation. And it may even go as far as training leaders on unconscious bias and really holding them more accountable to making sure we do get equal placements. And then I guess coming back to the practitioner level, also asking the practitioner what their preferences and career goals are, rather than assuming that they would prefer to be aligned with a female team because they're female.
Yep. Beautiful. And Lauren, having worked in probably two different, both a lot with males, I think, earlier in your career, and then obviously females with the national team, I guess, have you ever felt subtly steered towards working in one way or another, and or in your experience, or if not, have you seen that obviously more recent with the AFLW expansion here in Australia? Are you seeing a little bit of that happening if it hasn't been your experience?
Probably. It wasn't, I guess, what my opportunity with the Matildas came up because I think I was only one of two females working in the A-League. So I was lucky in that, again, I got approached about that job, and being a female meant that I, it put me in a position where I got that opportunity early on. Now, this was in 2008 when the Matildas were not being paid. They were very, very semi-professional at best. There was, only, I think, 8 staff that travelled with the team. Now there's about 30. So it was, probably that being female steered me in that position to have that opportunity, which was amazing. But then I probably felt early in my career, as I alluded to in the article, that I was more comfortable when I moved to a female team just because I'd worked with those other teams, Melbourne Storm, in the very early 2000s. The landscape was a little bit different back then, and there was a lot of, probably unchecked behaviours that did make me feel uncomfortable that I never spoke up about, and I didn't want to create a fuss. So I did feel when I moved into the women's space that I felt a lot more comfortable. And then after having kids, even though I'd had a lot of experience in sport, I lacked a lot of confidence coming back into the sporting arena and took a very low-paying job in AFLW at Geelong, so that I could sort of get my foot back in the door and start that process again. So whether it was that I wasn't necessarily steered by an organisation, but maybe my feelings was that I felt more comfortable in those environments to get started again. And as I built my confidence and I just got naturally older, I definitely felt a lot more comfortable in the men's space as well. In terms of currently, if people are getting steered in that direction, I think that, there's still an equal, I'm not sure if it's an equal number, but there's still a lot of male physios in the AFLW. But what I find is that they step up into an AFL position quite quickly, whereas often the female practitioners stay with the same AFL women's team for a lot longer and either then go and have kids or don't make that step up into the AFL men's. Whereas male physios use it as a launching pad to then keep going. They're in a professional sport. They network with the AFL men's team, and they make that step across to the men's sport.
Yeah. And I know Brooke Patterson, in our podcast, we did the Trobe, Mel Haberfield, but we did it with Brooke Patterson. Yeah, talked to that in Mel, saying she wants to work in the AFLW. That's her, where she really finds the passion. She doesn't want to use it as a stepping stone, but she can find that being a bit frustrating at times because it's almost used as a launch pad, when for her it's the pinnacle, and that comes down to probably parity in hours, full-time jobs and salaries and things like that, which is at the moment not balanced. I'm going to come back, and Lauren, we'll chat around. Obviously, earlier you touched on how you felt uncomfortable working in some situations in the sports, and that was mentioned in your article. So we'll come back to that soon. But Steph, what about yourself? Obviously, we've also got the NBAW is really big there. What's your experience in this space? Whether your experience or what you're seeing off the back of what Sallie and Lauren have said.
Yeah, I had a different experience. When I first started working with Olympic sport, I was working with women. I really enjoyed that. I didn't feel like I was steered towards it. It was more there was a vacancy there and I was placed in it. But then I just, due to scheduling and things, moved over to the men's team. But I can't say honestly through my career, I felt like I've been steered in a direction because of being female. Now, have I felt other things because I'm female? Yes, but never as far as where I work. And that, I think our Canadian sport physio systems I think there's a lot of females that are participating in it, and maybe so much movement within it that there's a little less of it, but I don't know what the cause is, but I had a pretty good experience that way.
Right. If you say open-ended question, if you're happy to share, like you mentioned, you felt other things being a female at times. What we would alluding to there?
Well, I mean, I think anytime you work in a predominantly male environment, that leads to opportunities for the odd inappropriate joke or comments, or people will test the boundaries of things. I think I came from a different perspective. I grew up with all males. I have 3 older brothers. I think I just naturally learned how to deflect behaviors quite easily. And that also, I think, helped with confidence walking into a room full of men. Like I don't feel really uncomfortable walking into that space. I think I kind of look at it like, wow, we have a long way to go. Why am I the only female in this room? Not that I'm too outward about it, but I think I've been more comfortable in those spaces. Have inappropriate things happened at different times for sure. I don't dwell on them. I realize that anything that I suffer through, I hope is creating a pathway for somebody behind me to come through that. And it's challenging because I don't I would never, not that I've ever had anything so significant that needed to be addressed formally, but there's also the stigma of a woman who speaks up too much in that space, and the fear of that sticking with you throughout your career. So I think that, when I worked in the NHL, somebody told me that at that time I was the only female physio working on a team full time, and that the female massage therapists only ever lasted a few months in that space. And that was like 10 to 12 years ago, which blew my mind. But I don't know, where that has evolved to, but I can tell you that the NBA is much better than that. It's come, I think, a long way, even in the years that I've been in the NBA. So, I think there's always that realm of possibility that people make comments that are inappropriate or, talk over other people. But I think those are learned behaviors, and you can help educate and reinforce that, if I was in a room with a female who, a male colleague with a booming voice sort of talked over her, I would redirect to her after the conversation and say, can you finish your thought, please? Like I try to bring attention to the fact that, somebody was in the middle of speaking. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of progress that's been made in the NBA for sure. And I think that, there's always room for improvement.
Thanks for sharing that. I think and I'm going to, this is an area we're about to sort of move in and speak to. So thanks for bringing that up. What the stigma component. How do you feel about that now? Do you still think, being experienced and being around for a while, do you still carry that stigma about, I guess, maybe not as willing to sort of speak up, or do you feel more open to do that? And what advice would you have to someone maybe earlier on in their career now?
I think that stigma is real.
Yep.
Yeah, and would it impact my decision making? Probably, I think. But then I'm just naturally somebody that tries to deal with things on my own in my own way. Um, I yeah, but in the NBA, I haven't heard of anything significant that way. So again, like maybe it's just a blessing, but I do think that I think there's a misconception for a lot of females that go into pro sport that you have to behave in a more masculine fashion to fit into the room. And I don't believe that to be true at all. Some of the most successful female physios that I've seen in pro sport have maintained their persona, whether they're feminine, more feminine or less feminine, but they don't try to be something different to fit into the room. Those are typically the ones that I've found have actually endured. And the NBA athlete that I've worked with over the years, like the average has been very welcoming to female practitioners. And I think that loops back around to, organizations and having balanced performance teams, because we kind of dismiss the fact that all the athletes we work with have very different backgrounds. Some of them find it much more comfortable to talk to a male. Some of them find it much more comfortable to talk to a female. So if you're looking holistically at the athlete, and let's say a rehab, if you want really good communication and trust, you have to be able to offer the options to those athletes that are being rehabbed so that they can communicate honestly and openly with you. And if being female, allows them to feel a bit more comfortable in that space, then I think organizations that aren't balanced are sort of missing out on something too.
Yeah, great insights. Lauren, your article, which I'd encourage everyone to read, it was termed Women Navigating the Sports Therapy Playing Field. I'll just read a small section from that, and then I'll pass that question along to you, because you gave some examples of where you felt uncomfortable working in the sport, and you said if players and support staff made inappropriate comments or behaved in a unacceptable manner, I justified this by thinking, well, I'm in their space. I don't want them to change the way they speak because I am a woman, and I would dismiss this type of behaviour. And you felt the result of that unintentionally problematic comments went unchecked it became the norm, and that compounding effect of the comments over a period of time made you realise that they were not appropriate, should not be tolerated, and you found that was deeply embedded in male sport. And yeah, obviously I think you alluded to then further to that compounding effect took its toll on you, and maybe where working the Matildas was a refreshing change, I guess. But I don't want to take the words from you. Can you, tell us your experience in this space, please?
Yeah, I think probably just as you sort of read, they'd sort of, there was me and one other female staff member, and sort of the boys would say something like the players, and again, this was 20 years ago, and even the other staff would joke in, like there was no one sort of saying, oh, that's not appropriate, or maybe you shouldn't say those sorts of things. Like, so, I'd walk into a room after saying something to a player, and he'd be like having a go at me in front of the whole team, and everyone's laughing. And I've walked into these situations where, even the staff and the managers and, are all kind of, it's not checked. No one's sort of sticking up for you, or and I was probably, I think, 22 or 23 at the time. So it's difficult for you to sort of stick up for yourself as well. And then you just thought, oh, well, this is their environment and I just have to put up with it. This is what I need to do to keep my job and to keep that security. But look, it got to the point where there was really inappropriate things, guys just taking their clothes off in front of you, or coming to talk to you with no clothes on to just see how you'd react, or, and there was a lot of really inappropriate behavior. Now, having said that, I haven't experienced that in the last part of my career. Things have changed a lot since then. But, looking back now, I feel like I should have spoken up at the time, particularly in some circumstances, whether it was either directly to the person or to management, so that sort of stuff didn't continue. And like Steph said, hopefully you're paving a way better for someone behind you. But if you're not changing it at all, then the next person that comes into my shoes is going to be exposed to that same sort of behaviour as well.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And did you, the stigma piece, as we sort of asked Steph, how do you feel with that now? Like, is there still for you a stigma of speaking up if there was something to happen, and how comfortable would you be to do that if you saw something inappropriate happening to a colleague or someone in your workspace?
Definitely, as I've gotten older, I think you tolerate it less. And also there's a lot of like safeguarding that you have to do now. So within the AFL, every player, every staff member has to do a respect for women, diversity and inclusion, gambling, like all these different things. So if any time anyone said something, and to be honest, it's not necessarily the players. Often it was the other male staff, coaches who are ex-players that have been in the system for, 30 plus years, or other people within the sports medicine even as well. So it's that, just I guess sometimes the male banter, and I'd sort of just say, oh, you're not allowed to say that anymore. Didn't you do your safeguarding, or didn't you do your women's in sport? You can't say that, and have a bit of a more light-hearted way to call it out. I haven't had to have any, there's nothing been as serious as there was earlier in my career, but I think if there was something that happened in more recent years, I would definitely call it out. Particularly, I worked with a couple of younger females as well. So just making sure that, it's more just, it's that unconscious bias. They often don't know that they're saying it. So if you just call them out, it does make them have to think about it a little bit. And often I've had one, experience when I've called out a coach and he's come and apologised later because he's thought about what he said was inappropriate. And so I think if you just laughed it off or didn't say anything, they would just keep doing it. It's just enabling that environment to continue.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Lauren. Often they don't know that they're saying anything that's inappropriate. It's just part of the banter, the boys' banter. But yes, having the courage to call it out does make a big difference. I think in the study we used the Gender Experiences Questionnaire, which looks at gender-based harassment in the workplace, and we surveyed both physios that had previously worked in elite sport and those currently work in elite sport, and it's certainly better for those currently working in elite sport, but women still experience much more gender-based harassment than men.
Yeah, thanks, Sallie. I was going to just get your sort of take on that there, but I think that sort of highlights the research component but it does sound obviously that things are improving, and but still some work to go, and a really important conversation for people to really feel comfortable to call out and to sort of as you say, set the path further for the other female clinicians coming through. So it's a really great topic. So thanks everyone for sharing on that piece. On moving to, I guess, how the supportive component of working in professional sport and elite sport, and as a female. So, and we know that, as Lauren alluded to, some females will choose to start families and have that component, and we know still that male plays a key role in that. How open-ended questions to start. Lauren, how supportive have you felt working in elite sporting environments when it comes to starting a family and caring responsibilities, and that career balance?
It's a good question. I was working with the Matildas when I got pregnant, and they're a camps-based program, so it was a lot of travelling. So I knew I kind of couldn't do that role straight away after having children. And I guess when you have a child and then you get pregnant again, there's a period of time where you can't. So there was probably, I think, 4 or 5 years there where I couldn't really do that work that I loved, because you were either traveling or, if you were in a live-in program like an AFL team, you had to be available. Often it's inflexible hours. Your schedule changes every week. It's really difficult to get care, whether it's from your partner or your grandparents, or find childcare that's consistent, because the hours are so inflexible. And I think that was a real barrier for me to go back. It wasn't just a bit of background, often with sports, they're contract-based programs, so none of it's employed. So I never had maternity pay. I never had any job security, whether I got pregnant or even whether I didn't. I've gone from a year-to-year contract pretty much every I've never been employed in 23 years of working as a physio, basically. So there's a really low job security. There's no, you can come back when your kids are older. I was so I took a chunk of time off then. I did go back to the Matildas and have worked with them since 2021 up until 2024. And that was 9 years after I had my children. So, that wasn't a matter of me. It was a timing issue as well, and them needing another physio to come back in to help out. But I definitely felt like during that period when you're raising your kids, it's really hard to be involved with sport just because of the hours, the travel, the commitment and the inflexibility, really.
Steph, what's your sort of thoughts in this space? Obviously, we know the demanding schedule over there, and I guess, and Lauren will come back to the solutions or not solutions, action items that we think would be important to reduce some of those barriers soon. But yeah, knowing the travel demands in the NBA, I imagine it's difficult, but is there still that sort of sense of urgency to get back to work, like as well within people who are maybe taking maternity leave? Is there a fear of losing a role or becoming less relevant, or how have you seen that in your experiences?
Okay, so there are a lot of females working on performance teams in the NBA. There are only a handful of mothers working in the NBA. I only know of one that has had a child while working in the NBA, and her organization was excellent. They gave her some paid time off. Luckily, her child was born in the off season, and she only missed, I think, part of the preseason before she started working part-time, and they made some arrangements for her to not to have to travel all the time, so ease her back in. Now, the American system, even if you have maternity leave, it's very short compared to Canada, so that part of it was kind of stunning to me. But like the other moms in the league, each of them has somebody at home, a partner who's very supportive. So there are a lot of dads, a lot of physios who are dads who have very supportive wives at home, and the handful of women that have children have great husbands who step up and fill in. Is it hard for them? Yes, like they'll tell you for sure that it is very challenging, but they're also passionate about their career. So I'd say in the NBA, it's been kind of inspiring that that's the direction it's going. Accommodations are made for when kids are sick. Other people step up and cover. And just the fact that there are moms working in the league full time is actually quite, I think, it's an optimistic sign for the future, I would say. There's just not that many of them.
Do you think, two-part question, do you think there's not that many because it's so demanding for that space from the work standpoint, and as in have they just dropped off? And two, out of interest, what leave do you get? I know you're in Canada, but in the US, I know like maternity leave is very limited. What's sort of your example there? Like, how long was it post birth when she was back working, for example?
Okay, so yes, it's an insane schedule, even just for a single person who wants to have a normal life. You basically give everything up. You're from season start to season finish. You might be lucky to get a day off a week, and usually those days are covered or occupied with rehab. So just for instance, I went for 8 weeks without a day off through a rehab. Like it's a very heavy schedule, and I don't have kids myself, so I can't really speak to that. But I do have a husband, and you never see them. You don't even see your partner most of the time. So yes, that's a big inhibiting factor, I think, for a lot of people to take it on. But I think it's really important that there are a few people doing it, because others realize now that it is possible. It won't be easy, but it is possible, because some people are actually doing it and they're making it happen for several years at a time. So I'm very I admire them that they can do it because even, if you don't have kids, and even the single people are just exhausted most of the time. So to go home to children that are crying and stuff would be very challenging. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Oh, it was just out of interest. Like, how long is the leave? How long is like maternity leave cover in the States generally for the staff working?
Like normal staff or NBA?
Yeah, NBA, for instance.
NBA, I don't. Everybody's on a contract, so I think it's really organization dependent. I don't think you, as far as I know, you don't get maternity leave.
Okay.
So it's really how you negotiate with your GM and whoever your supervisors are to see if they'll allow that.
Okay.
But I have actually one of the people on our board. He's a first-time dad, and he had paternity leave with his organization. So I mean, that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, nice. Okay, and Sallie, your I don't think the research delves into this area too much. Like, what sort of information can you provide us, I guess, on, how from your network, and how do females feel in the environment of the elite sport, and how supportive are they to take extended periods of leave and come back and have their job?
We did actually ask, sort of a question along those lines in terms of whether or not you felt parents or carers were supported in your elite sport environment.
Yep.
And both men and women equally reported that there was only sort of, I guess, moderate support of pregnancy, parenting, and sort of caregiving responsibilities. And that support really tends to affect women more than men. I think the thing I still find really interesting, women, we are frequently questioned about our commitment if we have children, or whether we can do the job, whether we can do the travel if we have children. But men are never questioned whether they can do the job because they have children. And as Stefano said, having a supportive partner at home should mean that a female can, probably apart from the first 6 months maybe, can do the job equal of any male. But it's that in-base bias that assumes that we can't.
And Lauren, your time, you touched on earlier, maybe had the time off. I think it was between, you obviously had 2 kids into 5 years or so off, and you felt less confident to go back, was I think your wording in there, and you sort of took a lesser paying role and what have you. And how do we navigate that process, and how, I guess, other female clinicians, do they feel a rush to get back earlier, is I guess where I'm going. Do they feel concerned about maybe, my job might go if I'm not back at 6 months or 3 months or 12 months, rather than say, hey, I'm going to take 2 years and my job is still there, and I'm going to walk back in and have that role? Because I was chatting to another female physio who worked for 10, 15 years in AFL and felt her time through the maternity leave and was really difficult. Didn't feel, and in the end, her job became a job share with someone else, and because basically he'd come in and covered maternity leave and sort of had taken that job and run with it. So when she came back, they had to split the role and things like that. So yeah, I imagine there's like a pressure to get back, and it's probably not just in high performance sports, in any role. What's your sort of feelings in this area?
Yeah, I guess I can probably only speak to my experience, and it. I had the job with the Matildas, and I was working in a clinic, and it was my choice to take off time to be at home and raise my kids. So I didn't work at all for 4 years. And then when I came back, I started some clinical work. I also did my level 1 and 2 strength and conditioning because I wanted to come back in and have more of a rehab background and base. And then when I did sort of apply for jobs, I guess part of it was I didn't want the pressure because, I had been out for a little bit. I didn't want the pressure of working full-time or long hours. So I took a job that was when the AFL women's team was just starting in Geelong. And I thought it would be best for me to take that pressure off as well, given that I had been out of the system for a little bit, to take a job that was probably, I think it was 2 or 3 days a week for 3 hours, and paid a bit less. So I guess that wasn't the pressure for me to then step up. And once you get back to work, you're fine. I think it's more just a little bit in your own head to start with. So it's your belief probably a little bit of your own belief systems and the stories that you're telling yourself that maybe, oh, are you going to be able to get back to that? And are you going to be able to manage having kids at home? And are you going to manage when you don't have any sleep and that sort of thing? So I just needed to feel like I could do it and get my foot back in the door.
Yep. Oh, nice. And I might throw this one around to each of you, and then we're into our sort of quick fire session. But you raised some really good elements earlier, I think, where you know, you were only on employment contracts, so there was a lack of job security. There was, you know, how to be more, I guess, what do clubs and organisations need to do to make you and female clinicians feel more supportive in the space to have kids and come back to work? What are some areas that you would really advocate? And I might start with you, Sallie, that should be in place.
I guess it's a big question, but I think just starting with, formal policies for flexible work, parental leave, and caregiving. I think in the elite sport setting, they're pretty underdeveloped and probably inconsistently applied. And I think if the elite sport setting can, bring themselves up to speed with perhaps or hopefully the rest of the business world, that'd be a really good start.
Yeah, and Lauren, you talked to how, the job security, someone, that it's really rigid structures and they change schedules all the time. Is there scope to be more flexible to, I guess, the female clinician and more open, whether it's job share opportunities or, sharing time slots or something like that, where that whole schedule changes and you have to roll with the sport because you're a slave to it? It doesn't maybe need to be that way.
Yeah, I guess probably not just for women, but I think for men as well. I think there's a real perception in sport, and particularly what I've experienced in the few sports that I've worked in, is there's this badge of honour to who's there first and who's there the latest, and the 80-hour weeks, and that's pretty much the narrative of who's working harder than the next person. And I honestly believe that we could be way more efficient at the club. We pander to the players so much. It's like, they come in late, oh, don't worry, because we'll just do what you need at the end of the day when it's my time, or they want something when they want it and they get it immediately. And I think that sometimes we can be way more efficient. You would have sat into many AFL meetings, I'm sure, Nick, where you're like, oh, we could have wrapped this up in 10 minutes and it's gone for an hour and a half. And then you get to the end of the day and I'm, rushing out the door. I've done my work. I've been there for 8 or 9 or 10 hours and I'm rushing out the door at the 4 o'clock. And the other... and it's generally the male staff, because that's who I work with. Oh, let's all go to the gym together. And I'm like, shouldn't we be all getting home to our families? So there's this I think we can be more flexible. I would leave and I would do my other work at home. Their preference maybe was to stay and do it. But I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of, having worked in women's sports where you have no resources and no time and no funding, but you still manage to get stuff done. When you seem to have these full-time ones where you've got all this time, I think we can be more efficient and therefore have more flexibility in the hours. It's just we choose not to, because that's the way it's always been.
No, well said. From my experience, I couldn't agree more. But also, coming from, I used to share a little bit. Obviously, my wife and have two young kids when I was working professional sport, and I would rush to get home because I felt like every element of time I was just floating around the club doing a long meeting that I was taking from her. And we talk around the supportive person at home. I think you do need that, but also I think clubs and organisations can be more supportive of males so they can support if their partner is a stay-at-home or looking after the kids early on, then get home, or support their ability to do their career in transit, because they're, as you say, inflexible schedules, changing days off, it makes really life difficult for the partner to do her career as well from a male standpoint. So that I think my experience is in the sport, there's huge growth in that area as well, just to support all parties. But thanks for sharing. So and Steph, you're for what you're saying and touching around there, is there room for improvement? What's areas do you think the clubs and organisations can do to maybe support women, so you are having more mothers working in sport and in the NBA to feel supportive across their journey?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Lauren. I think there is so much wasted time, and there's this weird pressure to just be there the longest every day. And those are not always the most productive people, but they look good to management because they're always around, which I think is silly. I think you could be much more efficient and more productive if you're more thoughtful about how you spend your time. In the NBA, I would say that there's a lot of opportunity for it because there is so much travel and there are always injuries. So you could easily create a role for a rehab practitioner that doesn't travel with the team. I mean, if you're going home every night, that's a massive bonus for a parent, rather than being gone pretty much every 3 or 4 days for 3 or 4 days. So that's one possibility. I do have to, say kudos to the Brooklyn Nets because they asked questions of that. They were curious about the female experience, and we had another female who I think really wanted to be a mom, but the schedule didn't allow her to really date much or anything. And so she expressed that she was planning on freezing her eggs for hopefully in the future to become a mom later. And the GM actually jumped on that and he's like, well, does our medical plan cover that? And he made sure that they changed the medical plan to facilitate future women who come into the sport to have that option so that they can use that time in their career without having to forego becoming a mother, maybe even down the road. So that was actually, if there's a sign for optimism that these organizations are actually trying to look for opportunities, I would say that was a big one.
Yeah, that's great. All right, team. I'm going to finish with, really enjoyed, hearing your experiences and really appreciate everyone sharing. So we're going to finish with a bit of a quick fire sort of question round, so to speak. And we'll just go around the table on 3 or 4 quick fire questions. But if you could have the power to change one thing in elite sports as high performance tomorrow to improve conditions for female clinicians, what would that be? I'll go with you, Sallie, to kick us off.
I'll stick with my, mandated, transparent, merit-based recruitment for all sort of sport and exercise medicine roles in elite sport. And if we can back it by gender equity targets and actual public reporting, I think we, can help organisations go a long way to actually making a difference in the long term.
Perfect. Steph?
Yeah, sorry, I should have really put a little more thought into that. I think
That's right.
I think maybe training amongst performance team staffs to increase I think collaboration and communication. This is going off on a tangent, so that you work more comprehensively as a group and you facilitate and support each other, whether that's women supporting other women as well. But increasing that level of trust so that you can rely on your colleagues to have your back, so that everybody supports each other towards a common goal. Because, we've talked a lot about the male perspective on the women's experience in sport, but we don't necessarily always talk about the women's input into that. So another tangent real quick. If there's only 1 or 2 roles for females, those females should really go into those roles and support each other and try to help each other succeed rather than see each other as competition. And I've seen that happen as well. And when that happens, I think that just sets us further back. But if you try to help each other succeed, then there's more room for opportunity for more women to get hired. So that's kind of another tangent we didn't really talk about, but I think that that's something to be addressed down the road.
Yeah, certainly raising each other up to keep sort of pushing forward together. Yeah, I like. Definitely. Lauren, how about you, one thing to change?
Those were both great points. I would probably say just valuing that clinical output rather than the physical hours and having that sort of flexibility. So changing the environment to help us.
Yep, nice. What's one thing female clinicians should stop tolerating and action? I'll go back with you, Lauren, to put you under the pump.
I had one that was just the idea that we're lucky to be there. I think we're sometimes like, we're so lucky, and then, we sort of don't, you think, I guess it's a bit of that imposter syndrome, like you're there because you're good, you've got there on your merit, and it's actually probably even harder for women to get there. So believe in yourself and be confident in your skill set.
Lovely. Sallie?
I'd say that we should just stop accepting this is just how sport is when we're faced with some of those things like sexist language, being excluded from meetings, the gender harassment, and then try and look at more formal processes to actually report some of these things and bring it up. I think that's
Yep, beautiful. Thank you. And Steph?
Yeah, without sounding too cliche, I would say sitting at the table more, where there's not opportunities, try to create them for yourself, try to express your interest, or make sure you speak up when the opportunity is there. If you, have something to contribute. That intimidation can be pretty strong for a lot of females, but I think creating space for the females in the room to speak and contribute always gives a different perspective.
Yeah.
So create it when you can. Yeah.
Love it. And final roundtable one and final question for the session is, what's one thing you're optimistic about in the space for female clinicians in high performance sport? Why don't we go, Lauren?
I had just the rapid professionalisation of women's sports and the increase in funding has really helped, and I've seen that in my time. And it's just creating a new blueprint of what elite sport can look like, being inclusive, diverse, and sustainable.
Great. Steph?
I would say that one thing that's given me optimism is just seeing the number of females present in the room increasing over the past 10 years in pro sport. So that's cause for, optimism, I think, across all sport.
Yeah, great. And Sallie, to finish?
I was really optimistic that we're even having conversations like these on this podcast, so that's great. Thanks Nick. And I guess the growing data and the growing awareness and strong leadership from women, but also not forgetting the male allies are super important as well. So I think there's lots of things to be optimistic about. And hopefully, we'll be able to continue to forge the way for change. So the young physios and other, sport and exercise practitioners coming through have an easier path than perhaps some women have had in the past.
Beautiful. Well, that sort of wraps things up for me. Was there, just to the floor, was there anything else anyone wanted to sort of raise or say that we've missed that you sort of wanted to get out before we wrap up?
I would say thank you for creating this opportunity to talk about this. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I would echo that.
Beautiful. Oh, no, we appreciate that. And, thanks very much for coming on and doing this. And, really keen and open to sort of keep expanding on that and use our platform to sort of encourage that change to keep pushing forward in the right direction. So, all ears for ideas and other scope to how we do that. So, Sallie?
Can I just say one thing? We're also looking to repeat this survey that we did in physios who've worked in community sport. Can I send you a link for that, Nick, that you could maybe
we'll definitely
attach to something? Yeah. So looking at the experiences of sport and exercise medical practitioners working in community sport in Australia. So just to see whether it mirrors the elite sport situation or whether it's a different scenario.
Perfect. No, we'll definitely do that. Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for tuning in. And we appreciate it.